Hey, what's really going on? Bitcoin cryptocurrency today. Going to be taking a look at Cardano ADA against USDT. Going to be taking a look at some of these key technical aspects of price action moving forward. Going to be assessing some of these pivotal areas of support and resistance I believe we're going to be interacting with in the very near future here. Let me know in the comments down below. Are you bullish? Are you bearish? Do you trade? Do you hold? Or do you let the price action unfold? What are your thoughts on price action moving forward? Are you bullish? Do you think we found support and we're going to interact with that multi-dollar, almost $3, $2.50 to $3 Cardano in the coming weeks here? Or are you bearish? Do you think we're going to fall through this, what appears to be support just below us, and think we're going to interact with these lower levels that we just came from? Now, jumping right into it to kind of recap price action that has interacted with this ascending trend line since the kind of sort of like end of March of 2020. We've had price action rallying above it, interacting with and breaking below kind of at the beginning of September of 2020. We ultimately traded from the beginning of September until the beginning of January of this year before we interacted with it. Had a couple touches off of it as resistance before breaking it after some consecutive higher lows. We finally broke at the beginning of February back above this trend line after spending however many kind of months below. And now we seem to be very much bullish enough to be continue to consolidate in an upward manner against very high sell pressure at these levels, all the way to interact with that ascending trend line again as support at the kind of end of April of this year to set some higher highs at around like $2.40, $2.50 kind of thing. But ultimately there is very high sell pressure at these ranges, and so we seem to be making our way back down to this ascending trend line. And so in the next kind of few days here, we will be running out of kind of time to kind of maintain support along it. And I feel like if by the 17th of June, if we can't hold above this ascending trend line, we could very well break this as support and interact with perhaps levels around $1 to perhaps 94 cents, as that does seem to be a kind of key range of support that we could kind of bounce off of. There does seem to be some local kind of resistance, like what was resistance at like kind of the end of February, middle of March, and the kind of middle of April. We had some kind of three kind of rejections off of this range between 139 and 147. We seem to be holding above that zone. We could be more short-term bullish if we kind of stay, if price action can stay like above that for kind of like longer. But I do suspect with these consecutive kind of like lower highs, we will likely break this ascending trend line here and interact with those kind of lower levels around $1, perhaps sub $1. Ultimately, in the long term, we are quite bullish, in my opinion. Fundamentally, the buy pressure for Cardano is higher than ever, and there's plenty of traders like buying at these levels, and these dips are being bought up very quickly. So ultimately, in the long term, we could see the multi-dollar Cardano in the kind of very near future, but some buying opportunities, perhaps sub $1, might present themselves kind of beforehand. When we consider EngineeringRobo, along with the Fibba Zucchini, Illuminati, Lamborghini levels of geometry, we can see a new perspective come into play. That 0.618 line at $1.53 is going to be potential significant bullish, like short-term support if we can close above that. Ultimately, I do feel like that will become resistance very soon here as we fall toward that ascending trend line there. 0.5 Fibonacci line at $1.24 will be a potential decent kind of bounce level that we could interact with. The 0.382 line at 95 cents is kind of my sort of most sort of like bullish bearish target. It's just above that 200 daily moving average. And so ultimately we could still be long-term bullish even if we are at 95 cents. We have some significant resistance at that 0.786 line at $1.95. That's going to be significant kind of like kind of resistance moving forward once we get back up there. And then we have that swing high at kind of like $2.47. And so there is mild resistance ahead of us before we make our way up there, but ultimately, based on the sell 2, sell 3, sell 4, hell, all these kind of bearish sell suggestions and this phase of accumulation that's playing out does seem to want to perhaps break downward, and we could interact with that kind of like dollar to perhaps sub-dollar level over the coming weeks here. When we consider Cardano against Bitcoin, we can see a new perspective come into play. Significant resistance, these lower highs. Resistance found around kind of like 4750 Satoshi, like 47 or like 4650 to 4750 seems to be kind of significant resistance moving forward. Ultimately, I suspect that will push us downward here. Some of these lower levels we could interact with like 4058 to perhaps like 3676 again, and still be kind of short-term bullish. Significant support might be found around 3094 Satoshi, which we could be very much bearish enough to come down to that target briefly before finding our way upward again. When we consider EngineeringRobo, along with the Fibba Zucchini Illuminati lines. We can see a new perspective come into play here when we consider the cloud buy supporting us since let's say the middle of January of this year, 12th of January of 2021. We've had that cloud buy supporting the uptrend against Bitcoin. We've had the sell for hell coming into play at the kind of middle of March, just for that buy for to return, as we found support along that kind of 0.382 Fibonacci line at kind of like 2183 Satoshi. That buy for was in play the whole time. The moon showed up at the 28th of April of this year to support the break upward. And now we seem to be seeing some kind of resistance found around that 53 Satoshi level. The sell forward came into play just a few weeks ago, and now price action does seem to be consolidating in what appear to be a more bullish manner, but a break downward, I believe, is pendant interaction with that 0.786 line at kind of like 40.55 Satoshi. I do believe is more likely than not a very bullish bounce off of that 0.618 level at 32.76 Satoshi would be a very bullish higher low relative to that wick at the 19th of May of this year. And so with that sell for present, we can expect some perhaps short-term to mid-term bullish price action against the price of Bitcoin. But with that moon present and price action above the 200 daily moving average, I do suspect the long-term trend to still be intact, in my opinion. If we return to Cardano against USDT briefly, and we were to consider the fear and greed index, we can see just why there is so much sell pressure up at these levels here. We've been very much overbought for quite some time now. We've been up in the FOMO zone since it would appear kind of like the beginning of February of this year ultimately, and so price action has been very bullish enough to kind of stay within this kind of range for a period of time, which is not usually what occurs when price action enters the FOMO zone. Typically, this is kind of like one of the two things that occur when price action enters the FOMO zone, and so upon interaction at these levels, the sell pressure is so high that typically price action is brought out of it, and we have to build up enough momentum to kind of come back to it. Although, if the coin is bullish enough fundamentally, like beyond kind of like technical perspectives, if we're bullish enough in a more fundamental manner, the tops get bought, bottoms get bought, and the rally continues. And so the FOMO present at these levels causes some very, very volatile ups and downs. There's a very high technical sell pressure, but very high fundamental buy pressure, all fighting against each other, making price action very volatile. And so we do appear to be entering the end of our kind of like time in this FOMO zone here. Some very significant volatile, some very significant fundamental news would have to break to cause a very volatile break upward. But ultimately, I do believe exiting the FOMO zone is perhaps what's necessary for the trend to continue. And so I do believe we are kind of nearing our exit point at kind of like a few days here. Some levels near $1, perhaps sub $1, could present themselves very shortly, and I do believe those are going to be good levels to accumulate in the trend long term. When we consider Bitcoin against USDT, we can see a new perspective come into play here. How this sell-off is playing out, and so there's definitely plenty of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, as I've been mentioning in kind of my previous analyses. We have lots of new traders getting shaken out by this very crazy retracement, this very significant pullback from all-time highs in a very short amount of time. This is very jarring. We do have price action making its way to that 32K level. I've been suggesting that we will find our way down there for quite some time now. These lower highs and significant resistance found at that 0.618 level suggested that we could very well continue our way back down to that 0.5 line, which would have been more short-term bullish if we could have held. But I very much was suggesting that we could have made our way to that 32K level, or perhaps even that 0.382 level at like 27K. And so there is still some room for downside. And we can still be long-term bullish, even if we are seeing price action in the high 20Ks, low 30Ks. We can still be quite bullish long-term, in my opinion. Some accumulation, some sideways, some downside is very much necessary, I believe, for the uptrend to continue. We've had a very bullish and parabolic run for Bitcoin, and the past year has been ultimately so bullish, like a multi-100% year. I believe, like a 50% or so correction is kind of necessary for the uptrend to continue if we want to see hundreds of more percentages. Interaction with that FOMO zone, I believe, is inevitable. Up at 95K there, that could be the potential market top. I do believe 100K is pending for this year, perhaps early next year. This does seem to be, just a very nice phase of accumulation. A good bottom would be 32K. But like I said, it is not impossible to interact with 27K at that 0.382 line. Significant resistance and sell pressure under the 200 daily moving average and the 0.618 level at 41,500. Even if we come all the way back up to that zone, we could be like sent right back down to where we came from, as the sell pressure is going to be very, very high at those ranges. Now, thank you for hearing my analysis. Try Engineering Robo free with a link in the description. Subscribe here on YouTube. Check out all the other social media down below. Let me know in the comments down below if you're bullish, if you're bearish. Do you trade? Do you hold? Are you scalping during this crazy sideways? Do you have a big long, a big short planned? Are you holding through all this diamond hands, through all the crazy sell-off? Did you sell everything at the top, at the bottom? What's your strat kind of moving forward? Thank you for hearing my analysis, and tune in for the next one.